Brenda Avdilla, and today we are here to talk about the secrets of the mid-career pivot. We will be 20 minutes together, and your presence here is totally confidential, as with all of my webinars. And I will not ask you to raise your hand or take a survey or anything like that. I am flying solo today because my trusty Laura might not have access. So if you can't hear, she always recommends that you go to a different browser. But otherwise, we're gonna go. And I'm going to be independent technologically. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to be your coach for the next 20 minutes. The mid-career pivot, mid-career crisis, mid-career angst, that is one of my specialties. I'm very passionate about that. I'm very passionate about all of the stress and feelings and issues that surround kind of being at mid-career, maybe age 35 to 55, and being relatively unhappy or unsettled in some way. So in our time together, I'm going to really help to reframe your thinking. Obviously, we're not going to solve world hunger in 20 minutes, but I want to reframe your thinking, help you address some of the very pervasive myths, and talk a little bit about steps and just a real organizing your thinking around this whole career thing. So the 180, this is something that I hear a lot in my work. You know, I want to do a 180. And the definition of a 180 is to turn and face in the opposite direction. So I want to tell you a little story about that. I was sitting on a plane and I was chatting with an airline pilot who was commuting home after his trip. And I told him what I did. And he said, oh, I did a 180 very early in my career, and it was the best thing I ever did. So I asked him to tell me about that. And he'd gone to school, very smart guy, gone to school to become a mechanical engineer because his dad said that was the best money. And he hated it. So after 4 or 5 years, he quit being a mechanical engineer and he went to pilot school. And that was his idea of not mid-career, but the pivot. So now he was sitting next to me 25 years later, and the airlines was about to retire him because they force retirement in this particular airline at age 65. But the great part of the story is that he was not at all worried because all of these years he had been perfecting his own drone camera design. And because he was a commercial pilot, he has a lot more license to fly drones. And he had already done 2 Hollywood huge blockbuster movies where his drone photography was used. So I explained to him that he didn't actually do a 180, he did a pivot. So for me, a pivot is when you utilize your gifts, your talents, your experience, your skills in a different way than you have in the past. So a pivot is a 180 is a very sexy concept that, you know, we would make this big change and it would be very dramatic and very different and we'd never have to be a CPA again or whatever it is. But really, a pivot is a much more realistic and long-lasting change. So how do you know when it's time for you to make a pivot? One is that you have extremely high stress and you have stress over time. So we all have stressful deadlines and stressful elements of our work, but when you have that super high stress over time and it's becoming chronic, that can not only affect your body, which is obvious, but it can affect your brain and how you perceive change, how you perceive what's going on around you. It has a huge impact on what you see, how you see the world. And that is a very, very good indicator that it's time for some kind of a pivot. If you're not sleeping well, if you have low sense of meaning, like your work has become meaningless, and I'll do the last one, burnout. If you have kind of all of these things, high stress, poor sleep, low meaning, and burnout, definitely time for a pivot. But really the biggest indicator is if you take some time and really think about your values. What are your business and life values at this age and stage? And if there is a dramatic disconnect, so if the work that you do, let's say that one of your values is, world peace, and you work in a bullet factory, that might be a very obvious, but a values disconnect. If your work requires you to do something that is misaligned with your core values, there's a chance that you're going to need to find a different place to do what you do, or to pivot and do something a little bit different. So this is where we're going to spend a lot of our time. Hopefully you can see the slides. If not, you'll be able to see them on YouTube after. But the myths of the mid-career pivot. The mythology around career change is just fascinating to me because it's so pervasive and it's so inaccurate. So the first one that I hear is that I'm too old. And it's ironic because the young people that I coach who are 25 and 28 and 32, they think they're too young. So I think that's hilarious. Here's the thing about age. If you are vibrant, and if you are clear-eyed and engaged and you're interested in humanity and work, you are not too old. If you are burned out and you look it, then you're probably going to get discriminated against for your age. The other thing about age is that you really want to focus on what industries are you interested in. Most, the overwhelming majority of industries are very interested in having a grown-up come to work for them. And so age can be tremendously to your advantage. So don't listen to family when it comes to that. But if you're, if you want to be a account rep in an ad agency and you've never done that before and you're 53 years old, that's probably not going to be a fit. It's a very young industry. So if, 75% of the industries, age is really not an issue. It's a bad time of year. I absolutely hear this. And it just cracks me up. When I was a recruiter for 6 years, I thought I would have from Christmas to New Year's completely off. And I didn't hear from people on Christmas Day or New Year's Day, but all the other days I had clients calling desperate to make their hire before the new year. So you have to be sensitive that there are going to be some days where you're not going to get responsiveness. Maybe if it's an industry that closes down for a week, you're not going to hear from them. But otherwise, absolutely do not let up on your search during the holidays. One of the things, if I had to choose between you starting a search between December or July, I would pick December all day long because with the economy being good, people go on a lot more vacations now, and July seems to be kind of a not getting a lot done kind of month. Okay, I need to start another myth. I need to start networking first. Like that's where I need to start because I don't have a network. Well, first of all, you do have a network. If you think about all of your former coworkers, everybody that you've ever met at a convention, everybody that you work with now, you have a network, your friends, your family, those are people who can help you. Even if they don't know what you do, they don't understand what you do, and they're not connected with your network, they can still be of tremendous use to you in finding your new role because they care and love you, care about you and love you. And that trumps getting introduced to some stranger on LinkedIn every time. But before you even think about going to a networking event or activating your network, you have to figure out what you want. And that is not something that we're going to cover in this webinar today, but finding out what you want is a critical first step, not putting your resume together and going networking. You've got to figure out exactly what it is that you want. And that is generally not a quick answer. The fourth one, I need to find my passion first because I want to do something I love. Here's the thing about passion and purpose. If you know what you're passionate about and what your purpose is, it's very easy to talk about it, and it's very easy to advise others to stop wasting time and to find something they're passionate about. But if you're in a little bit of a mid-career crisis or any kind of crisis, it's very hard to try to monetize your passion. That's a lot of pressure to put on passion. Sometimes, like, I'm very passionate about my work. Absolutely. I'm also very passionate about cooking, but cooking is not my work. Cooking makes me mentally healthy. It makes me feel good. It meets so many of my needs. But if I use sort of what our culture is trying to do right now, which is take your passion and monetize it, then I would be a caterer, which does really not sound that good to me. So try to take the pressure off of passion and purpose. We have multiple passions and we have multiple purposes. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to, do what you hate all day so that you can do what you love later. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's better to just sort of table the whole discussion about passion and purpose temporarily while you sort of sort out what it is that you want, what you want your life to look like, what your career superpower is. That's a program that I do with my clients. But to just give that whole passion thing a rest for the time being. The second to last one, I need to take a pay cut in order to be happy. I hear this a lot. For me, that just comes from stress. That is just a stress response. And, I hear my clients saying, money isn't everything. I don't care that much about money. I'm willing to take a pay cut to be happy. Well, unless you are literally going to do a 180 and you are going to enter into a line of work where you have zero experience and zero credibility, then you should not have to take a major pay cut. Because here's the thing, that we bargain with ourselves that I can live on less, I can downsize, but we never do. And so that is just going to create 2 or 3 years of tremendous stress for you, and it could end up forcing you to go backwards or do something that you don't want to do. So it's better to take a longer time to figure out what your mid-career pivot is going to be, and continue to work and maybe rework your work, rather than to be impulsive and do a complete about face or settle for significantly less money. And the last one, I should get a part-time job or a consulting gig while I figure things out. Here's the thing, is that is like riding 2 horses, and it sounds good. And if you are in a money crunch and you absolutely have to do that, I understand that, but realize it's going to make it take twice as long. If you are trying to search for, find, and secure a part-time job and then learn that, because just because it's part-time or at a coffee shop, that doesn't mean they don't want your full attention. So that really just delays the process. So I want to ask you this question. What is the single most important factor in making a meaningful, empowered, well-suited, lasting career change? Is it your experience, your professional network, your negotiation skills, your mindset, your hot resume and cover letter, your LinkedIn presence? So what is it? What's your answer? My answer is mindset. Mindset trumps strategy every time. You have got to get your mental act together in order to move forward. It is the most important factor. And just like the whole finding out what you want thing, it's not generally something done super fast. And it's a really important part. Okay, so I have a little scale here of how to tell if your ideas are stress-induced or if they're based in reality. So in case you can't see the little scale here, if you're fantasizing about moving to Hawaii or working at Starbucks, that is a stress-induced fantasy. The problem with moving to Hawaii and opening a canoe shop or working at Starbucks, no offense to the baristas, but I'm talking about a high-level executive who's talking about working at Starbucks. Or as one of my clients said, she saw somebody vacuuming an office building the other day and she thought, I could just vacuum for a living. That sounds really nice. That is a stress-induced career fantasy. And the problem with that is you're still going to bring you and all of your issues and your type A behavior and all of your habits to Hawaii or Starbucks or to vacuuming. And so that's not a real answer. Another one is to open a business that's in your passion, like we talked about, quote unquote passion. So this is where, you know, the high-powered attorney stops practicing law entirely and opens a bakery. You hear stories about this all the time. You read about it all the time, and it's so inspiring. What I'm always curious is to see the backstory after 3 years. Are they profitable? Are they still in business? Occasionally, somebody monetizes their passion and opens up a retail store, but anyone in retail will tell you it is super tough, and you better have some skills other than baking or arranging flowers, because now you're an entrepreneur running a business. So sometimes that one is not a fantasy, but mostly it is. It is a desire to vacate our lives. Downsizing your life, we talked about. Working for a nonprofit. This is a little, you know, right of the midline, but just because there is meaning in the product, which in this case is, you know, poor children or sex trafficking, just because the work is meaningful to you, that does not mean that it's a good career change, or that you're going to be happy with that culture, or that you're going to be a fit, or that your skills are going to be appropriate for that. So just the, you know, working at a nonprofit without prior nonprofit experience is not totally steeped in reality. Start your own business. This is heading toward reality. That's a possibility for some of us. Some of us are designed for that. And even those of us that are will tell you you have some tough days. And some of us are not. We're better with a team. We don't like to be solo, that kind of thing. Change my habits at work. Not a very sexy suggestion, but it is based in reality. Oftentimes, when you admit to yourself that you're so unhappy that you might leave, something shifts. And then you have a perspective about your work and an empowerment that you didn't have before, and it changes everything. So that is a distinct possibility. And then rework your talents, which is the ultimate way to pivot, where you are doing what you do, you're doing what you're good at, you're not any longer doing the things that you hate doing, but you're using everything that you have. That ecology is what we're really looking for. So how do you know when you're ready for a pivot? You've cleared your baggage and past experiences so that you're not walking around with baggage. And anyone who's spent 5 minutes with me knows that I have a lot of thought leadership on clearing your baggage from past experiences and how important it is. You know what you want, and you're not operating from a stress-induced fantasy. You know your timeline, and it's realistic. You always want to give yourself, you know, a substantial period of time, certainly not less than 90 days. And for most of us, if you're still working, it's, you know, more like 6 months to a year. You can dedicate at least 12 hours per week to your research, your related activities. You have the funds to carry you without a part-time job or a job leap. And you're scared sometimes, but exhilarated. If you're not exhilarated by the thought of the pivot, then you need to get some help. Get a coach, get a therapist, go see your pastor, get some help, especially with that baggage stuff. So we are wrapping up, but don't go away yet, because I want to tell you there'll be a follow-up email, and there's a free quiz in there. And it'll take you about 5 minutes to figure out if you are ready for a career change. There's no charge for that. And I hope today's webinar was of use to you. I thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to serving you again in the future. Have a great day. Thanks.